I think one of the things I'd like to key in on is a distinction that you just made between those collectors who appreciate the taste of vintage spirits versus those who are more interested in the, I guess, like what you might call the just a monetary value of an unopened bottle, right? An unadulterated, unopened artifact style bottle. So, in your book, you mention some of these potential quality markers that might distinguish spirits that were made decades ago. Some of them are process based, some of them are a little squishier than that. So, what are some of the arguments to be made for vintage booze actually being higher quality, or we might call it more delicious than the stuff that's being pumped out today? What are some of those like quality markers potentially?
Yeah, and with bourbon, there's really no exact thing that we know well. With tequila, we know old tequila's better because they were using more mature agave. It's pretty simple, and some other reasons. But with bourbon, it's kind of hard to say why was it better. There's a few markers, as you said. What was the corn being grown of a better quality? Corn today is grown for yield. I've heard that the barrels were of a better quality. They were using oak trees that were perhaps 180 years old, and now they're using oak trees that are 80 years old. The older a tree, the more rings, the more potential places for the liquid to go in when it contracts, the more flavor. Um, Distilleries were using cedar fermentation tanks as opposed to stainless steel. Cedar creates its own sort of microflora that might add, signature flavors to, say, Maker's Mark and Wild Turkey, which used to use cedar. Distilleries were not, operated by computer. That was operated by a man who'd worked there for a long time, probably did not have a microbiology degree like a lot of the workers do today, just operated by a man who was going, okay, this seems like a good place to cut it. This seems like a good barrel to blend with this barrel. So I think you're getting kind of one man's opinion on what is good, and that man, like Jimmy Russell, Wild Turkey, was often right. Um, Entry proof's another big one. The highest entry proof you can legally put bourbon into a barrel is 125 proof in America. You put something into the barrel at a higher proof, the only thing that can burn off as it ages is the alcohol. You take a spirit and water it down to, say, 110 proof, and it's water burning off, not flavor. So a lot of people believe entry proof is a huge marker of quality. Not everyone uses 125 proof these days. Michter's famously, I think, is at 110. But a lot do use 125 proof just because it necessitates using less barrels, and thus it saves money. Back then, they didn't care as much, and they might put it in a very low entry proof, 100 proof, 105 proof. And that could be another reason why the flavor is so rich. I think it's interesting when you taste kind of pre-1990 spirits at a lower proof, at 80 or 85 proof spirit, there's a richness of mouthfeel that if you say try to Basil Hayden's today, it just doesn't exist. An 85 proof bourbon today is very watery, and I think that's an entry proof issue.
Hmm. Yeah, it's interesting how we're sort of simultaneously able to peg some of these production techniques to actual like qualitative outcomes. Like honestly, like, this stuff is testable, and people have, you can run the test on your own palate, or you can, look at some of the research that's being done at these distilleries. That like entry proof stuff, the cedar fermentation vats, the older oak, absolutely. You know, there's something there, I think. Then you go back to almost like the old masters status, right? With these old blenders who are, it's all like, it kind of reminds me of like a Stradivarius, right? Only a certain number of the Stradivarius violins were made by this old master, and they're still revered today for, the high art that we know for a fact will never be replicated again. So, I mean, that's kind of where I see this start moving from a like objective kind of process based valuation mode to more of like the, you know, hearts and minds, thoughts and feelings, squishy, a little bit more abstract. And
Yeah.
I love that you brought up that excitement is like one of the criteria for assigning value to a bottle. So I guess